I tell you how I'm just thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker for the 40th anniversary week here at the university. Not just for what this milestone is at the university, but for who our keynote speaker today. She's a pioneer, a visionary, and a giant of the big screen. Ruth E. Carter is a trailblazing Hollywood costume designer, renowned for her careful research, creativity, and details of her cinematic fashions. She's also the first Black artist to twice win the Academy Award, a stunning fact given that more than 100 years of Black artists in Hollywood, and our first to win an Oscar for a Marvel Studios. Her illustrious career spans more than 3 decades and boasts an impressive array of awards and credits that includes more than 70 films and TV series, including Do the Right Thing, Selma, Amistad, Malcolm X, the Yellowstone TV series, that's filmed right here in Utah. She's very familiar with Utah. And both Black Panther movies. I also have to say on a personal note, and for several people in the room, she's also a member of our sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So, without further ado, I'm honored to bring forth a chance to introduce her today. Please bring forth Ruth E. Carter.
Okay. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. First, I'm going to let you see this little video that will get us started, will get us warmed up, and make sure everything is working.
Shit right there. Ouch! He's never gonna have any more trouble! We didn't land on Plymouth Rock.
Assalamu alaikum.
Murder!
I have them.
You must be Black Dynamite.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Where he at? Respect. If you can't do that, then go.
Now get on back to work.
Demonstrate, resist.
They're gonna kill my children.
That means march. That means disturb the peace.
You better come quick.
We ain't slaves no more.
I am loyal to the throne.
For the drive!
we are vegetarians.
And that's the Tarut root.
Thank you, and good afternoon, distinguished guests, students, and faculty of the University of Utah, and all those joining us through live stream. I am deeply honored to be here, especially during the birth week of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a time that invites us to reflect on his enduring legacy. Today, I stand before you to explore how Dr. King's powerful ideology intersects with the art and craft of costume design, particularly from his seminal work, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? Dr. King's vision extended beyond struggles of his era. It was a blueprint for the future built on equality, recognition of individual character. My role as a costume designer, particularly in recreating pivotal moments of the civil rights movement in film, is to weave the vision into the fabric and characters. Garments of protest discovered in the film Selma in the simple form of a trench coat. Garments of protest in Selma with David Oyelowo's remarkable performance. David's tight shirt collar mimicking Dr. King's. Films like Malcolm X, featuring the exceptional work of Denzel Washington, and how dedicated we all were, telling the story of a zoot suit wearing ballroom dancer to a national civil rights activist. There were days on all of these projects where you felt the power of the costume as people assembled dressed in uniform. Shooting at the pyramids on a Spike Lee joint, so important to this moment in filmmaking, authentic to our visual storytelling and creative voice. I read countless letters from Malcolm X and from Martin Luther King, giving voice to me and full context to his story. Chadwick Boseman as Thurgood Marshall, a hero and a future superhero that is the suit of a man, Dr. Martin Luther King, a man of the people, traveling throughout the South, giving voice to the voiceless. He wears a superhero suit and a tie. I rumpled it and made it look as if he's traveled the long, difficult journey numerous times before. These films are not just historical pieces, but embodiments of Dr. King's ideals brought to life through the authentic and compelling costumes. Costumes design transcends more than just mere clothing. It is a powerful tool in storytelling. It builds characters that are real and relatable, echoing the diversity and complexity of the human experience. Through costume design, films like Do the Right Thing, Amistad, become more than just stories. They become mirrors of the community and cultures they represent, reflecting the very essence of Dr. King's mission. The melting pot in Do the Right Thing of Brooklyn, New York, the kente cloth of Brooklyn, t-shirts that say Bed-Stuy, do or die, representing a new generation of filmmakers, while showcasing the talents of our king and queen, Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee, as characters and as individuals. Now, how many, by a show of hands, have heard of Wakanda? Okay, so you know it's all made up, right? You can't go there. So, but what Wakanda is Afrofuture. And Afrofuture is a blend of traditional elements with futuristic visions. It's vividly portrayed in my work on Black Panther and its sequel, Wakanda Forever. So I'm going to take you a little bit through the making of the film Black Panther. Here's Wakanda. As I said, it doesn't exist. But Stan Lee and Jack Kirby made it up in the 1960s, and they put it there in the north central area of Africa. But when we did the movie, we had to come up with this world building, and the world building required that we used real tribes as inspiration. And one of the tribes that we used was the Basotho tribe in South Africa. Well, Ryan Coogler, who was our director, he felt like he couldn't tell a story about Wakanda in Africa, having never gone there. So he asked Marvel to send him to Africa so that he could experience the culture, especially with this community, which was one of the uncolonized communities left in Africa. And what our task was, how do we bring this into a futuristic model? We want to honor tradition, and here in this sketch you see our leader of the Basotho, which we called the border tribe. And next to him is the Queen Mother and their warriors. But we had to modernize it. We had to bring it into Wakandan time. We had to bring in technology. If Wakanda was going to be a leading country in technology, we couldn't have so much tradition there in the visuals that didn't allow you to believe that they were a modern place. And so these are how we played these images out. At the Warrior Falls, however, that's where we brought exclusive tradition to the Warrior Falls. If you recall, this is the merchant tribe, and their leader was this wonderful actress named Dorothy, who you see is adorning the big Fulani earring. So we did combine tribes at time, because there are thousands of tribes all over the continent of Africa, and we only used 12 of them. And there were so many wonderful elements to many of the tribes. We wanted to tell this story using a lot of those elements. As you see here, this is Shuri in the middle. She is adoring a Dinka corset. You see the young man standing there with the Dinka corset. It's usually worn by the cattle herders and by men or boys. But we gave this, this beautiful piece to Shuri as a part of her traditional costume worn at the Warrior Falls. And we went through this exercise with all the tribes. This is the mining tribe. They mine vibranium. You've all heard of vibranium, right? Okay, it doesn't exist either. We made it all up. And here is the mining tribe at the Warrior Falls, again, borrowing pieces from other cultures and communities in Africa. You see their Queen Mother with the Himba wig. The Himba wig is worn by a community in Africa that uses shea butter mixed with the clay soil, and they put it in their hair. They put it all over their skin. Many people think that it's a way of warding off mosquitoes in this dry climate that they live in, or it has some kind of antiseptic quality, but it's none of that. They just like the way they look. So next to the mining tribe elder is her fierce warrior, and he's wearing a Maasai piece. Now, if any of you follow the Marvel comics, you will see Tribal Council, and at the Tribal Council in the comics, there is a Maasai warrior sitting at the conference table. Well, Ryan Coogler didn't want to use that image in the Tribal Council. He wanted to use the guy with the lip plate, if you recall, the River Tribe elder who had a lip plate in the film. And so I was really disappointed. I really wanted to have this beautiful Maasai headpiece. It's worn by the Maasai warriors who look out for their cattle. They look out for the lions that are herding around to, take over some of their cattle. And this is a background player. That means he doesn't have any lines. So we can't spend the hundreds, thousands of dollars to create an authentic Maasai headdress that would be beaded in Africa. So I went to Pier 1 and I got a beaded placemat and I cut a hole in it. And that hole was really hard to cut, I'm telling you. And then I painted it, and when my crew came in the next day, I stayed up really late doing that. I came in the next day, we added the fur and the feathers, and that's how we got the Maasai headdress at the Warrior Falls. Many times we examine lots of costume design. Thousands of designs are submitted. I have a team of illustrators. Marvel has a team of illustrators. It's their design group. And we come up with lots of ideas before we decide on which one. So in this case, we decided on the green for Lupita Nyong'o, who is the fierce warrior of the River Tribe. And this is how it played out at Warrior Falls. And you see here her tribal elder is the River Tribe elder with the lip plate. Now that lip plate is put on with prosthetics. He sits very early in the morning in the makeup trailer, and they add this lip plate. He can actually talk, believe it or not, and he has to sip his beverages from a straw just underneath the lip plate. Here is the royal family. Now, when we shot this image on the first Black Panther, this film had not come out. Nobody knew about it. It was very quietly done. And we assembled the cast into this set for an exclusive picture for Entertainment Weekly. You have Zuri, the priest of Wakanda, standing next to Wakabe, the leader of the border tribe. They protect the outer limits of Wakanda. Above Wakabe, you have Killmonger, who returns to Wakanda to avenge his rightful ownership to the throne. Below Killmonger, you see Nakia in her River Tribe green and her fierce brain fog and her fierce weapons. Below Nakia, you see Okoye, leader of the Dora Milaje, the highest ranking female fighting force of Wakanda. Next to Okoye is Shuri, seated with her mid cannons, her little panther cannons. Above Shuri, you see Ramonda, the queen mother of Wakanda, and next to Ramonda is the late great Chadwick Boseman as the Black Panther. Now, we assembled this group in this picture that you all know so well now that the film has been out for some years, but the film had not come out. And I am standing right in front of this group of people during a photo shoot, and I can't believe my eyes. I realize that we have done something incredibly groundbreaking and something incredibly fresh and new, and I couldn't wait for the world to see. It ended up making over $1.5 billion. So we're going to talk a little bit about the costume design. The Black Panther suit in specifics. This is a suit that's worn in Captain America Civil War. It's called a habit. I looked at that suit. That was when we first introduced the Black Panther to the world. And I thought, it's put on a mannequin in my office. I noticed that there was things that was attached by Velcro. And I was like, wait a minute, the Black Panther and Velcro? And then I said, let's bring in Chadwick Boseman to put on this suit. So Chadwick comes into my office. It takes 2 people to get him dressed into this suit. He first puts on a muscle sculpt, and then he puts the outer layer on, and he's stretching into the suit. He's doing really big stretches, karate kind of stretching, and then he adorns the helmet. When the helmet is put on and you see this uniform, it's majestic. My mouth is on the floor. I really see and experience how the power of these suits really have an impact on the fans and the viewers. Then Chadwick looks at me and he says, yeah, but this suit was made so fast I can't lift my arm more than this, and I can't breathe out of my nose. So I thought, oh no, not the Black Panther. He's got to be able to breathe out of his nose. So we crafted a new suit, and we made the centerpiece removable. So what happens is the Panther comes to set. He goes into a chamber. He gets scanned. Photographs are taken. There's hundreds of cameras in this booth. They scan the complete costume. Then we remove the front piece off the helmet so he can breathe, and we send him to set. And in post-production, they put it back on. That's a little Easter egg for you movie fans. Also, there was a connection to Africa that I wanted to make, that I felt that the Civil War suit did not have. I thought, if this Panther is walking through Wakanda in this cat suit, how does it connect to Africa? So we came up with a little triangle. Now the triangle is seen in so much of the African artistry and their sculptures and their woodwork, and it has a representation of the family, the mother, the father, and the child. So we called it the Okavango triangle, and we added it to the surface of the suit. So the top skin has this triangle. Also, what was designed by Ryan Meiterding of the Marvel Design Group was a vein that ran throughout the suit. You might recall that when it's met with kinetic energy, it lights up. It lights up purple. So this veining also had this striation on it, African tribal striations, but at first it had Wakandan language. Yes, we came up with a Wakandan alphabet and language. So we had the language skewing around the suit, and Marvel couldn't decide what they wanted it to say. And they knew all the Marvel fans would pick it apart and try to figure out what it was saying. And it was a big commitment for them. And so they decided, no Wakandan language, just the tribal markings. So that's what you see veining around the suit. But in combination of those tribal markings and that Okavango triangle, you have what is the tapestry of Africa. When you look at some of the fabrics, the African fabrics, the Ankara, you see a combination of patterns and colors. And this, to me, was the right type of design for the surface of the Panther suit. As subtle as it is, it still connects him to Africa as he moves through. Here we have the Dora Milaje, and the Dora Milaje means the adorned ones. Another little Easter egg for you. And they are the highest ranking female fighting force of Wakanda. They protect the king. So everyone who was a Marvel fan and a comic buff, they wanted to know what the Dora Milaje and Black Panther were going to look like. If you remember in the comics, they were pretty, I like to call it bombastic. You know, it's a whole made up word on my part. But, you know, in comics, you can actually get away with so much. Nobody is actually going into action. No one's flying through the air. People are flying, but they're still. In this case, we had to come up with a design that would actually work. No cheerleader skirts, no triangle tops, no high heels. They were going to be taken seriously because the director, Ryan Coogler, wanted to see them in uniform. Also, we have a way in movies, and with AI these days, you probably hear this conversation that we tile and we replicate. And I was only able to build about 20 of these costumes, and in the movie, you see many, many more. So as we designed this costume with lots of browns and rusts, it wasn't vibrant enough. I used the Maasai as my guide. I wanted the red to be so vibrant that when you saw 5, it felt like 10. When you saw 10, it felt like 15 because of the strong color of the Maasai red. Then the Himba, I just fell in love with the Himba tribe and how they use all the elements of the cow. They use the food for food and sustenance, but they also make costumes out of the hide. They're like costume designers, and they ruffle their skirts and they wrap them around their waist and they add beadwork and metalwork. And there they are with their shea butter and their clay, marking their faces and their hair because they love the way it looks. So we took our sketch and we turned it around and we created this harness on the Dora Milaje that would travel around the female form, honoring the female form, but not exploiting it. Their whole body, all of their vital organs are covered. So this is how it ended up after we made it. You see the neck rings of the Ndebele of South Africa. You see the beadwork of the Turkana. You see they have a little buckle on their waist honoring the king that they protect. They have the influence of the Himba tribe with the leather back skirt that we stretched just as they did on the edges, and we added beadwork. And you see this harness, this leather harness that travels around the female form. So I often thought this harness could be something that it comes off as one piece. The shoulder piece, the leather, the beadwork in the front, it all comes off as one piece. And why wouldn't this Dora hand this down to her daughter that maybe she trained? So the idea of costume design and coming up with the stories that live behind what you do is the beauty and the joy of costume design. Here is Mbaku, the leader of the Jabari. You might remember him. He said, "We are vegetarians." Well, he has a fur palette on his shoulders. We used fake fur. But during the camera test, the fur pelt kept falling onto the floor. And I thought, oh my God, this is the leader of the Jabari, and he can't keep the fur palette. Even though they're vegetarians, he can't keep it on his shoulders. So it was quite embarrassing. I tried everything, safety pins and string and rope and everything to keep it up. And finally, we used what cosplayers use all the time, refrigerator magnets. And that's how it stayed up. And it was also very hard to get off. But they're inspired by the Dogon of Mali, and the Dogon, like they're the first astronomers, and they have all this incredible woodwork that they use. They have this celebration of once a year to the solstice where they adorn these colorful raffia skirts. And once Ryan Coogler saw the skirts on the research, he said, I think the Jabari should wear the raffia skirts. Now Marvel was scratching their head at this. You know, a warrior hasn't worn a skirt in any of their films, and how is that possible? Well, I started looking at the museum pieces, and I found this one museum sculpture that you see, and it was a mix of feathers and rope, and I loved the coloring, and it looked really strong. So I incorporated that concept in the making of the skirt. Once the Jabari warriors came in for their fitting, they were like a team of football players, and I said, right this way, I got a little skirt for you. That didn't work out so well, so I had to come up with another layer, which you see here, which a leather sheath that was worn just underneath it. And so we sent this video up to Marvel so that they could approve the design. and it was approved. Here's how it played out at the Great Mound. Shuri is the leader of the Wakandan Design Group. She is like the little Tony Stark of Wakanda, and everyone wanted me to have a lab coat on her. And I thought, you know, at this time, Letitia was 16, and I thought any 16-year-old genius is not going to come into a lab and put on a lab coat. They're going to come in their sweats or whatever they have on and just get to work. So I designed these overlays, and I thought that we could play with the idea that she had all of these overlays over her clothes that were a protective layer. So we talked about Afrofuture and how we take tradition and we infuse it into a superhero model. And I'll show you that again. Here we have the Basotho with their blankets and the Maasai doing their traditional work. And here's how we interpreted it into Black Panther. And this is how it plays out at the Warrior Falls. Thank you. Wakanda forever.
Well, that was amazing. Thank you so much for just weaving in everything from MLK to Afrofuturism to just everywhere. So thank you so much. That was great. I just want to keep this going. So I'm going to introduce, we're going to have a brief moderated discussion with Ruth, and then we are going to have questions from the audience. So to help us moderate today's discussion, we have Malijah Garfield. He's the inaugural director of the Black Cultural Center at the University of Utah. And Malijah has led the BCC since its opening in 2019, and this year celebrates the 5th year of the BCC at the university. In that time, he's helped to broker sponsorships for the BCC with Pepsi, the NBA, the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, and others. And he's helping to build new programs and initiatives that support the UVU students, including Generation Next, the Male Success Initiative. Malijah is a native of Rochester, New York, an avid moviegoer. He loves Spike Lee, a Marvel comic enthusiast, as well as Black Panther, and a fan of hip hop, neo soul, 80s and R&B, and 80s R&B. In 2021, Malijah was named to top 20 in their 20s honoree by Utah Business, and I think he might be the only person in the room more excited to be here with Mrs. Carter. So Malijah, please come up.
So we can talk. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Man, I am just excited. Oh,
thank you.
I am fanboying over here. If you don't mind, first I would just like to say one happy belated Founders Day.
Yes.
I know your sorority's Founders Day was yesterday.
Yeah, it was.
And so just happy belated Founders Day. Also to the other AKAs in the audience. So I'm a huge fan of your work. Myself, just to give you a background, I'm a comic book enthusiast. I have about $15,000 worth of comic books at home.
Wow.
I'm also a huge fan of Spike Lee as well. I think I have a collection of all his movies back at my parents' house, and have some signed memorabilia of things from the set, actually.
Oh, wow.
My father was able to buy some things off the
He came to me, I'd have given them to you for free. A box in my basement.
Yes. But I would say really what I would like to kind of share today and kind of talk about really is the costume designing and the background that you were stating. And if you don't mind, I just have a couple questions and then we'll open it up to the audience. I would say, as well as for the audience, if you would like right now, so y'all can queue up your questions, please go to Slido, which is SLIDO.com, and you type in the code MLK40, and you can queue up your questions as of right now, and then once we get to you all, I'll be able to pull out those questions here on our tablet.
Okay, got an assignment.
Again, that is slido.com, and the code is MLK40.
MLK 40.
All right. So with this may sound very strange. For a 21st century college campus, I would say costume and really just clothing in general is kind of an afterthought. A lot of students you would see on a given basis probably are wearing Crocs and a sweatshirt to class every day, or Uggs or other different things. And so with that, you know, the uniform of a college student may not necessarily be much afterthought, even though there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes into the clothing of a college student. They may pair some other items with that as well. But for you, fashion is clearly a language. And actually, you called it another character in film. It communicates something about where your characters have come from, where they see themselves going, how much money they got in their pockets, who they love, even what they think about the politics of the country or the world they have lived in. Can you tell us a bit about how this idea of clothing originated for you?
You said a lot there. Well, first of all, just a college student. Can you imagine if I were to do a scene at a university and I put all the college students in a suit and tie or a dress and heels? It wouldn't feel very authentic. So even though it might be sweats and Crocs, it does identify the students and the times that we're in, you know, this molded footwear. We'll look back at this, I guarantee you, and it'll feel very sci-fi. But you can't cheat, you can't change things. It becomes a part of the culture. And when I do a period piece, I'm always looking at the research. I am never trying to get out of what was real unless there is a moment in the storytelling that's asking for something to be surreal. But that rarely happens. You know, it does happen when you see like Everything Everywhere All at Once. You know, there are films, there's one, Poor Things, that's out now. You see this like direction that's taking costumes into this like surrealistic mode, but also being a period piece. You know, it's very difficult to do, and it's a balance. It speaks directly to storytelling, and that's what we are as costume designers. We're storytellers. We're not trying to do a documentary. You know, we're in an entertainment industry. That means we are going to entertain you. We want to keep your attention, and so clothing and costumes are side by side in that way, that I have to understand the socioeconomics of the times. When you think of the 1920s and you think of flappers and short haircuts, it's a sign of the times when women were becoming more empowered and they wanted to drop all of the feminine ways of dressing and come up with this, this little boy cut, this bob. And they did all kinds of things during that flapper time. The flapper was considered a rebel. So we can say that about the college student, that they're maybe a rebel to fashion. I know I started out in theater, and I was definitely one of those theater students that was the anti-fashion. You know, I didn't get into this profession because I liked Barbie dolls. I got into this profession because I liked telling real stories about real people.
Thank you. Thank you. And to kind of follow up on that question, you were talking about these different time periods, the 20s, the 30s, the 60s, the late 2000s, early 2000s. My question, in conjunction with the first question, is how do you go about researching these different time periods? And what does that process look like for you?
Well, you never stop becoming a student of your passion. That's my advice to all the students here today and on live stream. You have to stay a passionate student of your life's work, and then it will never feel like work. It never feels like work for me. Not 1 minute of my day is not enjoyed when I start going through the research. Now, I worked with John Singleton quite a bit, and I did a film called Rosewood, and we studied the work of James Van Der Zee from the 1920s. And I looked at so many studio photography, and I could see like the elements of hand-me-downs. Like, we don't even have the concept of hand-me-downs anymore. You know, has anybody given you their shirt? Has anyone given you a coat that they can't fit anymore and you wore it every day? I mean, rarely does that happen. But in the rural South, it was a regular practice because people didn't just go to the store and buy new clothes. Like, I even remember growing up, now this might date me, that I had school shoes, I had play shoes, and I had church shoes. 3 pair, that was it. So the research of people and the why they have what they have is fascinating to me. And when I see like images of, like, say, the Great Migration, and people are leaving the South, these Southern folks are leaving the South, and they're going north, and they have put on a coat, but yet underneath that coat is their cotton clothes they had as they were farmers and they were poor, but they received a coat that didn't necessarily fit them. So that starting from a vantage point of like passion takes me down so many avenues. I'll go to Pinterest. I know everybody knows Pinterest. I used to love Pinterest. I don't love Pinterest anymore. I go to Tumblr. I look on Tumblr. I look at people's photos of their family. I go to fairs, and I might buy an old photo album. I have a few of them from different eras, from the 20s, and I see people standing just normal. I'm really looking for normal. I'm not looking for fashion. Sometimes fashion can upstage a really good performance. Sometimes you just want the person to be in a t-shirt and a pair of slacks because you want to not look at them. You want to hear them and experience them. So we have a delicate balance. You know, I can't overtake every scene with big costume design. I have to figure out when it's important to show that this character has a big costume, if you would. The Black Panther series is much different than most films that are produced, because this is a Marvel film about a fictitious country, and it has to do with Africa and technology, and so it's all fictitious and made up, so we had to come up with lots of ideas for costumes. But, you know, in other films that I have done, like Malcolm X, we really want to see the man. You know, we want to understand his journey, because he started out as a dance hall guy in Lansing, Michigan, in a zoot suit. And then he goes to prison, and he's taught about the Nation of Islam, and he sheds all of that. It becomes very monochromatic in prison, very denim. And then he comes out, and he's this national speaker for the Nation of Islam, and he meets his mentor, Elijah Muhammad. What does that look like? He wouldn't come out of prison and have a fashionable suit on all of a sudden. We had to give him hand-me-downs. We had to give him a borrowed piece of clothing so that the empathy and the depth of how he felt was also seen in what he had on. So that kind of research is your tools to building a great story through costume design.
I like that. Thank you. And with that, to kind of talk about that hand-me-down kind of portion, do you feel, is there a future for hand-me-downs? And if we look at it, yeah.
I think it's upcycling. You know, there's a website on YouTube I love to go to. It's called What Are You Wearing? And people describe what they're wearing. And 9 out of 10 people say they're wearing something vintage. And vintage is a big part of costume design. And so I love it when people, you don't know who handed it down, but it's nice to be able to upcycle.
Absolutely. All right. So my next question, I really loved your presentation on Afrofuturism and kind of looking at that as far as in clothing and particularly with Black Panther. And what I would like to see is, for you to talk about is with Afrofuturism and popular culture and your connection to Dr. King's vision, the way he infused into his philosophy during civil rights era to inspire Americans. But I wonder if you would like to talk a bit about your approach to history, the span of history from films like Amistad to Malcolm X to Do the Right Thing, which is a phenomenal film, to Black Panther. What does that reflection piece and that infused portion in your approach, how do you approach history?
It's also reading. You unfortunately just can't go by images that you see. In Amistad, I looked at a lot of the great painters, Werther and Hopper, lots of painters to get a color palette. And also, I have a volume of books called Blacks in Art Throughout the Ages. And in those books, I get to see the details of what the painter interpreted, the ancillary characters in the painting are wearing. So it starts there, but you don't know what you're looking at when you look at pictures in history. You really don't. I mean, it does give you a feeling of history, it does tell you a story, but you have to have a companion reading going on at the same time. I did Roots reboot, not the first one. I was a kid when the first one came out. I did the reboot, which was much more like historically accurate, and it was done by the History Channel, and they gave me books to read. The historians gave me books to read, and I was like, okay, I got 5 books here to read. But one was fascinating, and it was called Remnants of Self. And in this book, I saw how in the paintings there might have been, let's just say, mattress ticking, which is a stripe, cotton stripe. And in these paintings, I noticed a painter had a cotton stripe, red and white stripe on an apron. And then there was someone with a shirt that had the same red and white stripe. And then there was someone's kerchief, red and white stripe. And I was like, wow, well, that painter took liberties on this striping. Then I read in the book that plantation owners would import bolts of fabric from England before they separated from England, bolts of fabric. Sometimes there were little houses on the plantation that were dedicated to making cloth. So they would make a ton of the same stripe. And then people would create clothing for the slaves. It became a cottage industry. And that's why that old painter put those stripes the same way on so many people. And you could actually identify a slave from their plantation by the cloth that they were wearing. So when I read that, I was fascinated, and I decided that I would do that in my work. And so on a plantation, you would see several of the same cloth worn on the background players. And as they assembled in the lunchroom, and I sat there looking around like I was a proud mama, I was like, wow, this feels authentic.
All right.
That's how I approach it. Reading and watching.
Reading and watching. I like that analysis and just looking at things and being able to tell and put things together, I think, is an important skill set. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up actually to some questions, and then I have one final question for you.
How many of you saw Black Panther? How many of you saw it more than once? Okay, you got questions then.
All right, so again, if you are on the website, make sure you go to the website. The code is MLK 40. The first question I have actually for you from the audience is, when you did the costume for Malcolm X, did you use his actual wardrobe as inspiration? Were there any connections to the culture there?
One thing that I did do for Malcolm X was I wrote letters to the Department of Corrections because I wanted to see his files while he was imprisoned. And I had a letter writing campaign. I got a date and a time, and I went to Boston, and I was sat in a cubicle, and a bunch of files were sat in front of me, all of his letters that he wrote, his booking photos, his health records, everything. And because I knew that I would have to come up with a costume for him in those times where there was no photography. When he's talking intimately to Betty, when he's going to bed, when he's on the Hajj to Mecca, things are in black and white. I needed to mentally connect to him. And what I discovered when I opened the files there were letters. I saw his handwriting. I saw how once he became El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, how things were changing, and how he was very passionate about his religious studies. So you don't necessarily get the clothes of the people. Tina Turner, when I did What's Love Got to Do with It with Angela Bassett, Tina Turner came to set in the last 2 weeks of shooting, and we had been shooting already for 12 weeks. And I had been recreating her life as this iconic singer. And the day she came to set, like a PA, rushed into my trailer and was like, "Ruth, Tina Turner is on set. Come, bring all of we have this book, it's like a Bible with all of the pictures of every costume." And they were like, "Bring the book, show her everything." So, I felt like I was walking 2 feet off the ground, if you've ever experienced shock. And Tina, people are very sensitive about someone. Just think if someone were portraying your life on screen. And she said, she looked at the pictures and she said, "I would have never worn that." And so my heart sunk. And she says, "Well, Angela and I have a different body type. I have long legs and a short torso, so I have to wear one piece. Angela has a longer torso and shorter legs. She can wear 2 pieces." So she explained it. I guess she saw the crushing face I gave her. So after that, she kept telling me that she wore Armani. "I always wore Armani." Rest in peace, Tina Turner. "I always wore Armani." And I thought, even when you were in Nutbush? So we can't always, we have to take everything with a grain of salt. I sat with the late, great Betty Shabazz. She was a professor at Long Island University, and she told me that her parents did not want her to become a Muslim, and they'd send her clothes, and they wanted her, if she was going to, be this Muslim woman, they wanted her to have dignified clothing to wear. And so I take that in, but I also have to be a storyteller. I have to tell the story of the good times and the bad times.
Thank you. And also, fun fact, so my name is Malijah Malik Shabazz Garfield.
Oh, wow.
It's supposed to be the name El Hajj Malik Shabazz. But my mother put an M in front of it. And
your mom should be here right now.
Absolutely. The next question I have for you, and then we'll wrap it up with the last question. But the next question is, what is a way to be inspired by cultural identities that are not your own, and while also being cognizant of cultural appropriation? Do you feel that was accomplished with films like Black Panther?
Well, you didn't see the slides from Wakanda Forever, where we used the Mayan culture to create this underwater world that was inspired by the Mayans. So in Wakanda Forever, you have the historical anchor of how Namor comes to be, and you see these scenes that are played out in historic folklore, right? And then they go underwater, and they're influenced by their cousins on land. They create a world underwater. So how do the elements that are in the water connect with the inspired cultural elements that they still can see? They're living side by side with their cousins, yet they are an underwater world. So we were able to take all of the, fish fins, and we knew that the Mayans used the rubber plant, and they created a ball, and they played a game called the ball game, much like basketball, but with your hip. And we decided that we wouldn't have them living underwater, killing fish and making costumes, that we could take their knowledge of their own vibranium and this rubber, and we could create anything, because they had the technology, and the historical facts gave us the permission. So we created things boundlessly. So you'll see in Wakanda Forever, you'll see Namora's headdress, which is these big lionfish, orange lionfish fins that come out of her headdress. Now, the lionfish is only like the size of your hand. But she's this little dynamo. It's a deadly fish. So we took those artistic liberties because we were building a fictitious world under the ocean that was inspired by, as I said, the wonderful Mayan culture. And that we use historians, and we're constantly sending them images so that they can approve. Because there's a lot of, and also, again, in the paintings that were done by the Spanish conquistadors, they manipulated them to make it look like the Spanish were, saving the Mayans. But the Mayans had their own numeric code. They had their own systems of writing and bookkeeping, and all of that was burned. So we wanted to make sure that the historians liked what we were doing. And I'll tell you a quick story. After, I didn't get to go to Tulum when we were working on the film Wakanda Forever and doing the Mayans. I went afterwards, and there was a tour guide. And, it was hot. So, I have a bandana on my head. I'm like, nobody knows who anyone is. And someone asked a question, and he goes, well, there's a movie out. Did you see that movie, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever? He said, they got it right. So I couldn't believe it that he said that, and it was the highest compliment I could get.
I like that. Thank you. We have time for one last question. All right. The last question that we have for you, and actually this pays homage to you, is that we made aware to you and made aware to the audience earlier that you were the first Black artist to ever win the Academy Award twice.
Yeah.
Not once, twice. But you're also only the second person to ever receive her own star on the Walk of Fame in Hollywood for costume design. Yes. Why has costuming in film taken so long to garner the respect it deserves? And do you think that is changing?
I have been doing this a long time. This has not been an overnight sensation. I've been doing this long before they invented Spanx. And there was no respect for costumes when I came in. I came out of theater. Theater has high regard for costumes. They save them, they preserve them. I knew not to store them in plastic. I knew to keep them in a dark room. Theater taught me that. Theater taught me how to make the inside of the garment as well made as the outside of the garment. So that was my foundation coming into this. I had high regard for costumes. And then I started to work in film that had low regard for costumes. And I thought at the end of every movie, like, what's going to happen to my children? Like, they were like, well, we're going to donate it to a church, I guess. Sometimes there are big costume houses that take them and they rent them out to other movies. And in theater, or opera, because I also did work at the Santa Fe Opera, when a well-known singer wears a doublet, they keep it. They keep it. It has his name written on it, and they sew something on the inside. They preserve it. So I started to preserve my work, and no one cared. And before I knew it, I had a storeroom full of, storage full of costumes. No one cared. And then recently, I'd say within the last 10 years, costumes have become a focus. You go to any Comic-Con and you see people love them. And they want to make them, and they want to be expert at them. But the film industry took a while to catch up, and I think that these Marvel films have kind of led the way with that because they're so fantastical. But now we know that there is an interest in people seeing original zoot suits from Malcolm X, or seeing the Shaft coat from Shaft that Sam Jackson wore, or seeing my journey as an artist and how I age things down to make them look real. So now I have an exhibition of my work, and it travels around the country. And right now it's in Detroit.
All right.
At the Wright Museum, I should say, since we're live stream, at the Wright Museum in Detroit.
Well, thank you so much. I would say, one, thank you so much for coming here to Salt Lake City, meeting with us, and also just sharing about your passions and the work that you've done over an expansive career. We thank you.
Yes, it's been my pleasure. And thank you for your kind interest.
Yes, thank you to Ruth, to Melijah for your moderating. And we just want to thank our partners today, those sponsors, and today L3 Harris came today to represent our sponsors. And I just want to remind everyone that this is we're still beginning our week of 40th anniversary celebration here at the U. We have a film screening tonight for The Color Purple. We have our Reframing the Conversation tomorrow, our series tomorrow. We have an economic plenary session featuring Ashley Bell, who is the CEO of Redemption Bank, the first Black-owned bank here in the Mountain West. As well as we have a Student Voices Rising panel on Friday. And earlier today, we had our Utah Black History bus, and it is still there on display outside of the JW Marriott Library, and there's a display in the Gould Auditorium that you must see. It'll be there today until 3 o'clock, so please, please, please go and visit that. So to learn more about all of our events, visit our website, diversity.utah.edu. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.